Shikha, if we are ready, we can start.
Shikha is having some network issue. Can you please wait for a minute?
I've joined back.
Okay.
Can we begin?
Yes, Shikha.
Good morning to one and all present here. I'm Shikha Makhija, and on behalf of Somaiya Institute of Management and Team Interface, it is my privilege to be bestowed with the pleasant task of welcoming this distinguished gathering to the 16th SIMSR Global Marketing Conference. Today, we mark day 1 of the event, which will be followed by day 2 tomorrow. I would be taking you through the events throughout the 2-day conference. The theme for this year is Conscious Consumerism and Marketing. The conference focuses on the theme, scope, and its relevance across various aspects in the marketing arena. And with this 16th Global Marketing Conference, we at Somaiya Institute of Management are trying to achieve that by giving a platform to all the academicians across the world to learn, explore, and understand the world of conscious consumerism and its impact on our lives. I have the proud privilege to warmly welcome Honorable Vice Chancellor of Somaiya Vidyavihar University, Dr. V.N. Rajashekharan Pillai. Professor Pillai has been at the helm of affairs of many higher educational. We welcome you, sir. Professor Pillai has been at the helm of many higher educational and scientific research establishments for the last 47 years of service as a teacher, researcher, professor, and executive head of education, science and technology establishments in the country and abroad. An elected fellow of the Indian Academy of Science, Professor Rajashekharan Pillai is among the top-cited chemistry researchers in the country. He created an internationally renowned research group in the areas of polymer, supported peptide synthesis, photo-removable protective groups, and conformational studies of peptides and proteins. Over 50 doctoral and postdoctoral researchers have been trained under his direct supervision. Some of the top executive positions which Dr. Pillai occupied include the Vice Chairmanship and Chairmanship of University Grants Commission, Government of India, Executive Chairmanship, Executive Director of National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAAC, Government of India, Vice Chancellor of the Indira Gandhi National Open University, IGNOU, Chairman of Distance Education Council, Government of India, Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam, Kerala, Vice Chancellor of Cochin University of Science and Technology, Kerala. He is on the Director Board of Apollo Group of Hospitals and on the boards of several academic and research establishments of our country and abroad. Since January 2018, Professor Rajashekharan Pillai has served as a professor and provost of Somaiya Vidyavihar and Somaiya Ayurvihar under the Somaiya Trust, Mumbai. I request Sir to kindly address the gathering.
Thank you very much for the very long introduction. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, welcoming everybody to the 16th Global Marketing Conference organized by the Somaiya Institute of Management. I understand that theme for this year's conference is consumerism, conscious consumerism and conscious marketing. I think conscious is also included for marketing. I would definitely add that when you think about conscious consumerism and conscious marketing, the conscious capitalism is also has to follow naturally. So these things go together: conscious consumerism, conscious marketing, and conscious capitalism. Conscious consumerism is maybe the original word when it was thought about in 1954. It was called dollar voting. That was the thing, dollar voting, because people just through money express their consciousness, in buying and selling things. I think it was an economist, George Buchanan, in 1954, put forward this particular word. And in 1972, I just glanced through the Sage Journal. There is an article with the same title as Conscious Consumerism. That is the first research paper, which I have just seen as an outsider from the field, just when I looked at it. I'm extremely glad that this conference expects to showcase research papers by various national and international scholars, academics, and industry practitioners. Highly reputed journals in the area of marketing have agreed to partner for publication of selected papers from the conference. For the first time, I understand from Professor Isaac Jacob that there is an editor's session focusing on the protocols of quality research publication. It's very important to have an interaction like this. It is also some sort of an agreement has been arrived at by the organizers with prominent, high reputed journals in management for getting published some of the selected papers from this conference. These are all welcome signs for a very high quality conference. So Professor Jacob told me that another highlight of this conference is a presentation by the WARP India editor, Mr. Biproshi Das. Probably that presentation is tomorrow. So when it comes, let me congratulate the organizers, Dr. Monica Khanna, Professor Isaac Jacob, and all the organizing committee members for systematically and continuously organizing this conference under the KJ Somaiya Institute of Management for the last 16 years. I also take this opportunity to welcome the national and international speakers for this conference and the students of the KJ Somaiya Institute of Management and all those who are attending this conference virtually. I understand that in the inaugural ceremony there's a keynote address by Dr. Utpal Dholakia, who is going to say about the wise buying or maybe conscious consumerism in a broader perspective. So the message from this conference is definitely, naturally, for an ordinary person, is that we need to think twice before we buy. That is the message. So any consumers, we need to evaluate the social and environmental and ethical impact of his or her purchase. And this could have implications on the people and the planet in which we live. Companies and their products are required to demonstrate that they are good to the people and to the planet. Conscious consumerism spreads as more and more people become better aware of the harsh realities and negative impacts related to each purchase. These include climate change and pollution, as well as grossly underpaid workers with poor working conditions. Consumers increasingly pay mind to the impact their actions have on every stakeholder affected in the process of creating and delivering the product they buy. Technology makes buying easier than it has ever been. Technology also makes conscious decision making easier if you know where to look. With a brief search online, you can find much of the information you need to navigate your buying practices towards more ethical and sustainable options. The conscious consumerism is a commitment to making purchasing decisions that have positive social, economic, and environmental impact. It's a movement whereby consumers buy ethical products, avoiding unethical companies, and sometimes not purchasing at all. So, a socially or environmentally conscious consumer will think whether consumption is necessary once they decide to buy. They look at who is providing the product and how the product impacts each environment touch in its creation and delivery. Transparency is the key factor in such cases. Eliminating impulse buys and opting for companies and products that create positive impact. Consumers communicate a preference for better for the world business and products. Conscious consumerism, known also as ethical consumerism and green consumerism in some cases, is a trend that grows more and more popular nowadays. What is that conscious boom in consumerism? The language and labels of conscious consumer are more and more the marketplace and become part of the consumer culture. People started identifying themselves as conscious consumers, socially responsible and environment friendly. There is less traction with the term green, which continues to be viewed as more exclusive and harder to achieve. There are, of course, there are differing opinions on this. So making more informed decisions is the key for conscious consumerism. Consumers are looking beyond the buzz to make more informed decisions about the products they buy and the companies they support. To understand if a company does good things for the people and the planet, most use magazines and newspapers, certification seals and labels on products, the internet, and the advertisements. Friends and family members are certainly influential, but do not appear to be the primary source of information for making purchase decisions. So we have to move beyond convenience. Consumers have moved beyond that convenience when shopping for various products. While price and quality are of paramount importance, convenience has been edged out by more socially relevant attributes. Where a product is made, how energy efficient it is, and its health benefits are all integral to consumers' purchasing decisions. So the rewards of social responsibility can also be ingrained, can also be seen as a characteristic of social conscious consumerism. When given a choice between products of equal quality and price, consumers are more likely to buy from a company that manufactures energy efficient appliances and products, promotes consumer health and safety benefits, supports fair labor and trade practices, commits to environmentally friendly practices, and manufactures its products indigenously. That is also very important. That trend is also being seen nowadays. Consumers willingly engage in easy behaviors such as recycling cans, bottles, and newspapers, and using energy efficient appliances, but they often fail to adopt the plethora of more demanding behaviors like carpooling, using public transportation, or purchasing carbon offsets. The modern economy, businesses must have heart. The marketing industry is broken. Consumers are tired of interruption, push, mass media, and the manipulation of marketing and advertising generally. They want to deal with honest, ethical companies that have heart and purpose, that care about serving all the stakeholders. Instead of their pockets, they focus on these things. Conscious marketing proves that marketing can really work if the paradigm is shifted radically. How to create a flourishing business with a conscious marketing approach is also one of the focus themes of this conference. We need to demonstrate here as to how and to what extent beneficial this shift can be. Domain experts like you all present here, you all present here will try to explain this thought through the 4 tenets of conscious marketing. It is necessary to show how building a business with a higher purpose can lead to sustainability, profitability, and industry leadership, which are the 4 tenets of conscious marketing. Conscious marketing should work not only for multinational corporations, but also for cash-strapped small business indigenous concerns as well. As experts in the field, you need to illustrate how in the modern market, a business that does well and contributes to the elevation of humanity and the planet attracts the best customers, employees, suppliers, and investors. These people evangelize, and the brand each expands exponentially further to a more loyal audience than traditional marketing will capture. What conscious means to the consumer, business leader, and market should be known to the people at large. The who, what, and how of conscious marketing need to be popularized and known to the people. Conscious consumerism and marketing are ultimately the ingredients of conscious capitalism, which I mentioned earlier. This is a socially responsible economic and political philosophy. The premise behind conscious capitalism is that business should operate ethically while they pursue profits. This means they should consider serving all stakeholders involved, including the employees, humanity, and the environment, not just their management teams and shareholders. Marketing doesn't have to be the budgetary deadweight it has become now. It can be fun, humane, and inspiring for everyone involved. That change requires such a change requires a deep shift in thinking and behavior, which should beyond the transaction or the sale. To stay relevant in the modern economy, business must show what is at their core, why they do what they do, and why it matters. I am sure the researchers and academics who are participating in this global marketing conference will be deliberating on these salient aspects, and they will contribute to global sustainable development, eternally protecting the people and the planet. I have gone through the agenda of the 2-day conference of this conference. I have seen about shopping, different types of products and all that. But educational consumerism is also very, very important area. As a teacher, researcher, and education administrator, I think educational consumer, of course, now earlier there was some even doubts, even conflicts in the court, whether education, providing education can be considered as a consumer activity, or education is a consumer good. But definitely, when we pay things, there is when we of course we buy education, buy in the sense, of course, after necessary qualification. But there is also this consciousness in providing education is very, very important, and this is particularly true. Yesterday, we have seen the Supreme Court judgment also about the various aspects of education, and maybe commenting on the commercialization of education. Maybe definitely in this society, we have to consider the education offerings of institutions and the consciousness has to be very much reflected in our education offerings also. And educational consumerism is also very important area, and therefore there are large numbers of consumers, particularly consumers who are in shaping their mind and heart during the education process. They should also be convinced of the conscious mind behind providing education in the right perspective. hosting this very important event, and I'm sure that the KJ Somaiya Institute of Management will continue to host quality international activities like this in the years to come. I wish the conference all success.
Thank you so much, sir, for your gracious presence and inspiring words. We would now like to welcome the Director of KJ Somaiya Institute of Management, Dr. Monica Khanna, who has been a pillar of strength for our institute. We welcome you, ma'am. Dr. Monica Khanna, BTech, MMS, PhD, is the Director of KJ Somaiya Institute of Management, Mumbai, and Dean, Faculty of Management Sciences at Somaiya Vidya Vihar University. She has rich academic experience of 25 years as faculty and researcher in the areas of marketing and brand management. She is the visiting faculty at international institutions such as DHBW Stuttgart, Germany, and Institute of Industrial Management, Economics and Trade, Peter the Great, St. Petersburg Polytechnic University, Russia. Dr. Monica Khanna has had an industry experience of 4 years in engineering, industrial automation with Siemens Limited, Mumbai. She is passionate about research and writing case studies and has won awards for case study competitions at Aditya V. Birla India Center at London Business School in 2007 and 2008. Dr. Monica Khanna has successfully guided 3 PhD scholars. She has been elected as the member of Managing Council of All India Management Association, that is AIMA, New Delhi, for the academic year 15-17, 17-19, and 19-21. It is an honor to have you amidst us, ma'am. I would now like to call upon our beloved director, Dr. Monica, ma'am, to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Shikha. That was really a very warm welcome. And I've always been part of the marketing department. And in fact, I was also leading the conference for 5 years, from 2011 onwards to 2015. So, I understand the entire process and how difficult the entire procedure is to get together and to put together a conference of this stature. I'm really very proud that the conference is now in the 16th edition. And what's really a matter of pride for all of us, especially for the marketing department, is that it's an unbroken 16th edition. There were never any gaps. And especially in this environment where there were a lot of challenges, and still we went ahead, and the department colleagues have gone ahead and organized this conference. The time period selected was May. The hope was that the lockdown would come to an end and things would come back to normal, and we could actually have an in-campus conference, but it doesn't seem to be in this manner, and things seem to have gone from bad to worse. So I would like to, on behalf of the Honorable Chancellor, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, and all other dignitaries of the Somaiya Vidya Vihar University, all our faculty colleagues, staff, and students of the KJ Somaiya Institute of Management, and especially the marketing department colleagues, I greet all of you with a very warm welcome and a very good morning to all the dignitaries, delegates, and the participants to the 16th edition of the SIMSR Global Marketing Conference. Indeed, this is a milestone achievement, and my hearty congratulations to all of you. At this moment, as we are talking about conscious consumerism, I was thinking about the director's message, and I was just doing some introspection. And at this moment, I was reminded of the opening para from the book Tale of Two Cities, which was written by Charles Dickens in the year 1859, set in London and Paris before and during the French Revolution. And I quote the opening para from the book. It said, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. I do think and I do believe the current economic, social, and the health environment seems to be of a very similar nature. The fragility of life and living and its connect with the business and economic environment has been very, very starkly revealed. All of us seem to be at the crossroads of consumer behavior, of marketing and economics. I was reading another article from a psychology book, and very nicely it was mentioned our personal consumer choices have ecological, social, and spiritual consequences. It is time to re examine some of our deeply held notions that underlie our lifestyles. This is said by Professor David Suzuki. Thus, the theme of today's conference, Conscious Consumerism and Marketing, Collaboration, Empathy, Responsibility, is really very apt indeed. The term consciousness implies awareness of oneself and the world around us. Author Adam Zeman, that's what I read, it's a paper from 2006. What he said in his paper was, what do we mean by conscious and aware? He explains about different types of consciousness and awareness, and he states that these are multifaceted and steeped in cultural and intellectual history. In one of the types, he identified 5 types of consciousness and awareness. And in one of the types, Adam Zeman contrasts the narrow and broad sense of consciousness. With the former, the narrow sense of consciousness requiring mature human awareness, capable of guiding action and self-report, and the broad sense of consciousness involving the much broader capacity to acquire and exploit knowledge. I think it's time for deep introspection into our consumption habits and lifestyles in order to make conscious choices. It is also time for companies to look into their manufacturing processes to enable sustainability of our life sources like the air, the water and the soil, not only for us, but for the future generations that are going to come. It is important to remember our symbiotic relationship with nature at all moments in our lives. Many sectors of economic activity that were considered invincible and perennial are facing destruction today. How will the area of marketing evolve? And how will consumer behavior change in the post-COVID world? How soon will the world see the beginning of the post-COVID world? These are questions that require deep thought and analysis. The Department of Marketing and International Business at the KJ Somaiya Institute of Management has always been active in creating platforms where leading academicians and practitioners come together every year on multiple occasions to discuss the latest happenings and changes that are in the field of marketing and international business. At one such platform is the annual research paper-based conference, that is our SIMSR Global Marketing Conference. The quality of research papers being presented at the conference has been going up year on year, and this speaks very well for the conference and its acceptability among the marketing fraternity. I'm sure I've also gone through the conference, the schedule, and I've seen papers on conscious consumerism and marketing with all sub-themes. I really think that this is a very good conference, and there will be lots of debates and deliberations and lots of takeaways for all the participants and delegates and dignitaries from this conference. I once again wish the conference organizers and the conference and all the delegates the very best of luck, lot of learning, lot of deliberations, and welcome to the Institute and to the marketing department, though this conference is online. Thank you very much, and the best of 2 days of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful address. I would just like to inform the audience that Dr. Dholakia is facing certain network issues and will be joining us shortly. So kindly bear with us. We are honored to have with us today Professor Isaac Jacob, Area Chairperson Marketing and International Business and the co-conference chairperson of the 16th SIMSR Global Marketing Conference. We welcome you, sir. Isaac Sir is a professor and area chairperson, Marketing and International Business at KJ Somaiya Institute of Management, Mumbai. Additionally, he leads the MBA Integrated Marketing Communication, MBA International Business, and MBA Sports Management programs. He is also a visiting faculty at JBIMS, Narsi Monji, Symbiosis, IIT SOM, DHBW University Stuttgart, St. Petersburg University, Russia, IIM Calcutta, NITI, IIM Trichy, and HSBA Business School, Hamburg. His areas of expertise and specialization lie in brand management, marketing strategy, integrated marketing communications, global marketing, and sports marketing. He has worked in organizations such as Ogilvy, Mattel, Puma, J. Walter Thompson, etc. He's also been the Vice President Marketing and Country Head for Yes Bank, Customer Experience. He has also been a part of organizations such as Cadbury, Tata Safari, Exit Force, Fevicol, Parachute, and the list continues. His articles are published in the Journal of Marketing for Higher Education, Journal of Business Research, Journal of Promotion Management, Procedure Science and Behavioral Sciences, Journal of International Consumer Marketing. He has served on the editorial review board of the Journal of Marketing Communications, UK, and International Journal of Emerging Markets, Hong Kong. He has presented at various national and international conferences, EMAC, the Gamma Global Marketing Conferences in Hong Kong and Tokyo, CMC International Conferences in Milan, Exeter, Turkish University in Izmir, Turkey, the Global Marketing Innovation Conference, Prague, the Global Fashion Management Conference, Paris. He has co-authored the Strategic Brand Management, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th editions with Professor Kevin Lane Keller, Tuck Business School, United States, and has citations over 18,800. I now most humbly request Professor Isaac Jacob, sir, to kindly address the audience.
Thank you, Shikha. Thank you very much. Respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. V.N. Rajashekaran Pillai, Director, Dr. Monica Khanna, the 16th SGMC conference attendees, faculty, academic scholars who are also present, and of course, my dear students. This year's Global Marketing Conference theme is a wonderfully trending, if not possibly a little more proactive and something that looks into the future as a peek into how marketing is going to pan out, for instance. Consumers and consumerism have always been the bedrock of marketing, no doubt about it. They are on which companies align their marketing imperatives, their marketing initiatives, and also basically build on the basis of the understanding of customer, the sensing of customers, how customers are basically, viewing products and services, for instance, as such, and will be able to basically build up profitability for their company as such. So therefore, it has been always, if you look at the history of marketing, it's been always this understanding of the shifting, changing, disruptive paradigms that consumers have posed very cryptically in most cases, for instance, as such, for marketers to ensure that they understand customers' buying and consumption. Now, this has become more vital in this particular era of the pandemic, which has actually hit us all in the face with a big, huge thud, for instance, globally in India and all across the world, for instance, as such. And therefore, the consumption now has become the most vital, area that you would look at as far as company profitability is concerned, and even their survival in most cases. And we have all seen this on a global basis. You'll find that a lot of companies have gone down under as such, because either they've not been able to meet the requirements, of customers in this particular situation, this most unprecedented situation of the pandemic, but also because of the fact that perhaps they would not be able to understand how customers really know and want in this particular unprecedented environment. So the marketing imperative in recent times has become more compelling and more involving, and perhaps because of the pandemic and beyond, for instance, this is now becoming one of the biggest area of concern for marketers on a global basis, for instance, as such. So therefore, 2020 and beyond will long be remembered as a period that has impacted all tenets of life, prompting customers to adjust their lifestyles like never before. For instance, all of us have experienced that. We have personal experiences all across on each of these areas that we just about spoke about as such. And therefore, it's going to last with us. There's no new normal. The new normal is something which you can never think about the old normal, for instance, as such. And people are now, or companies are now gearing up to ensure that how do you perceive the new normal? How is things going to happen, for instance, in the next coming few years or maybe even a few months, for instance, as such. That is what most of the marketers have been actually pondering, during, and of course now looking beyond, getting a particular snapshot into the horizon that is going to transcend itself post, or rather during and across the pandemic, for instance, as such. So therefore, it is now becoming more imperative that brands have to reimagine the way customers work, the way customers play, the way customers school, for instance, and the way customers shop, for instance, on a global basis as such. And this is, it has to be sensed. It's not really understanding, because, the way you are able to basically perceive the future is going to be the critical variable as far as, taking charge and perhaps, riding the pandemic wave is concerned, for instance, as such. So it's basically the operating, paradigm, therefore, is how marketers are finding new ways of operating to address the consumer needs that are rapidly changing in a very crumbling environment. For instance, in a crumbling environment, it's not even changing environment. The environment has crumbled. The marketing landscape has crumbled. The customers are shifted and changed. Even the way they buy, the way they actually, look for products and things like that as such. As we all know, the online has become more imperative than perhaps any other time in the history of mankind and in the history of marketing, for instance, as such. And therefore, there's a lot of these disruptive models that are coming up. We've seen all that. We have heard about it. We have even read about it. We have even perhaps experiencing it, for instance. So therefore, now let me come to a very, I would say a kind of a quick and ready definition of the theme of our conference, which is conscious consumerism. Now, conscious consumerism is when consumers' buying practices are driven by a commitment to making purchasing decisions that have positive social, economic, and environmental impact. As our VC sir has indicated, this is how the way forward as far as looking at conscious consumerism is concerned. These are nuggets that are actually built into the whole concept of conscious consumerism. And it is now becoming more relevant in this particular world and in this particular environment, for instance. So it is a movement that customers would vote with their wallet to buying products, as again mentioned by VC sir, ethical products, avoiding unethical, companies, and of course, sometimes not even not even purchasing certain products and saying that, no, I will not buy this particular category or this particular product, for instance, as such. They're very harsh decisions, which are all prompted by the consciousness that has now come in as far as customers are concerned, which is related to the social movements that are happening, the social and economic changes that have happened, and of course, the environmental impact that has happened as far as these paradigms are concerned, as also perhaps looking at it from the point of view of the of the pandemic, which has now accelerated beyond even thinking or beyond even thought, for instance, the way that these imperatives have now become critical variables, in fact, compelling variables for marketers to look at it as such. So therefore, conscious consumerism is obviously the way customers are going to perceive a particular product, how they buy a particular product, how they look at what are the products that that is being bought, for instance, as such, where is it being produced, how do they consume the particular product, and how do they actually even dispose the product, for instance, as such. These are factors that is now becoming more compelling in this particular era of the pandemic, for instance. As mentioned by director, the SGMC Global Marketing Conference, and now of course in its 16th edition, has constantly strived to bring to academicians, practitioners, and research scholars through its thought-provoking, globally current, trending themes. And that has been our theme as far as the SGMC Global Marketing Conference is concerned. We have always looked at some innovations in terms of thoughts, ideas, and all. That's going to be perhaps even more disruptive than the current situation that is seen, and be able to really bring about academicians, practitioners, and even research scholars to contribute to understanding how these themes can be taken forward in a very impact creating way, both for academics as well as for industry practitioners. So that is how we have actually panned out the SGMC Global Marketing Conference as such, all through the 16 phases or 16 editions that we have taken this particular platform into, for instance, as such. So we have also looked at a lot of involvement from a lot of I would say iconic, perhaps, academics, as well as some very trending and perhaps doyens of the industry, the marketing industry or the marketing area, for instance, as such. Our 12th SGMC conference had this very innovative theme of looking at, and that was the time perhaps most globally, people were looking at as to how to capitalize on the global trends that are happening as far as consumers are concerned. And we looked at the new age consumer-centric marketing. It's a very trending at that particular point in time, where consumers were re-looking at their own options and things like that on a global basis. The 13 SGMC conference, the theme was marketing to global consumers. And this again became a very imperative thing as such, not only consumer centrism, but how do you really, after having understood the customer centricity, for instance, as such, how do you really market to these global customers as such, which has got a whole plethora of cultural factors, cultural nuances, availabilities, the retail, availability, including the kind of platforms that are available on a global basis, and how would you be able to really, satisfy customer needs on a global basis, cost effectively and impactfully, therefore delivering value to global consumers as such. And that was the third, marketing conference theme. The fourth one was marketing to millennials. Millennials were becoming compellingly big. And we looked at mostly from India. India has 440 million millennials. Can you understand this mind-boggling number? Which is now touted as the third most populous country in the world. As such, after China and after the India population, we have the third largest population in the world, that is millennials in India. And we strategized and we felt that, of course, it's now going to be the biggest opportunity on the globe. If you were to look at one market, India, and brands and marketers are obviously going to gravitate towards India, which is showing, phenomenal, potential, for instance, to market to them. So the theme of the 14th SGMC conference was marketing to millennials. And we had some wonderful presentations done, some wonderful, research papers presented, some wonderful academics that came in and, shared their experiences and things like that, including people from all over the world, for instance, as such, and also academics of great repute and perhaps stature that came onto a platform at the SGMC conferences, for instance, as such. So let me just mention just a few, for instance. We had Dr. A. Parasuraman, so lovely called Parasu by everybody else, everybody who knows him. Of course, he is the James W. McLemore Chair of Professor of Marketing, the University of Miami, and most famous for his so-called technique, so-called model, for which is now since 1982, this has become the most trending model in service quality assessment on a global basis, for instance, still very current, still very running, for instance. Then we had Dr. Udo Wagner, Professor of Marketing from the University of Vienna, and the ex-president of the EMAC conferences, the European marketing conferences as such. Dr. Wagner took some wonderful, workshops on various aspects of the technical aspects of market research, as well as looked into other areas of how to make marketing more scientific and perhaps driven by more engineering and thought ideas that could basically build into it as such. So that was Dr. Udo Wagner. Then we had Dr. Arvind Rangaswamy. Now, Arvind Rangaswamy, he is the Smeal College of Professor from the Penn State University in US, more famously known for marketing engineering, that he has co-authored with the iconic, of course, Gary Gillian, for instance, Gary Gillian, and who has won the EMAC, a lifetime award at the EMAC conference, for instance. We also had a wonderful researcher who has done some very trending work, and that is Dr. Venkatesh Shankar, the Coleman Chair Professor of Marketing and Director of Research at the Center of Retailing Studies, Mays Business School, Texas, A&M Texas, as such. Brilliant researcher who has got some phenomenal work which is done, and at the center of the retailing studies in the A&M Texas University, he has done some wonderful work, some wonderful modeling and things like that. He was also present. He took one very interesting and very interactive workshop that he actually held with us as such. We also had industry doyens and industry bigwigs coming in and sharing their experiences, for instance. And we had Mr. Sanjeev Sareen, former MD and CEO of Tata Global Coffee and Beverages Limited, who at that time we spoke about the trending emerging market customers as such a brilliant way of bringing in practice at the academic forum like the SGMC conference, for instance, as such. We also had the more I would say the bigger doyen, and that is Mr. Nitin Paranjpe, Chief Operating Officer of Unilever London, located in the UK, for instance, as such. Brilliantly bringing out customer insights at the forum, one of our SGMC conferences as such. So these have been the more, the illustrious academics as well as the more doyens from the industry, because as has always been our philosophy and vision as far as the SGMC is concerned, to basically dovetail and bring together academia and practice, because academia without practice effectiveness perhaps remains very inert, and therefore this is the global platform we looked at, which is the center stage platform for the marketing and international business department at KJ Somaiya Institute of Management Studies, for instance. So that was a real peek into our backdrop of our SGMC conferences and what has been our vision to take this particular platform ahead as such. The 16th SGMC Global Conference has really attracted 78 abstracts from Nigeria, from Kenya, from Finland, Mexico, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and various states of India as such. All the papers were put through the plagiarization check, obviously, plagiarism check. And those with 20% and above plagiarism quotient were rejected. The rest were then passed on for a blind review by our reviewers, our board of reviewers. 5 of the abstracts were rejected on ground of quality of research work, for instance. We have been pretty strict as such because the quality of research is also very critical at this global marketing conference, for instance, as such. 16 abstracts were not returned this year as such. This year because the authors to whom we sent this particular, reviewed researchers did not make the amendments or did not have the time or whatever be the this thing as such. In all, during the coming 2 days, we will have 57 abstracts that will be presented and deliberated during the 16th SGMC conference as such. That was a backdrop of or a background of our SGMC conference, the current status of our research papers that will be presented as such. Now, let me not, hold you back as such. Now, for this year's keynote address on conscious consumerism, we are really honored to have none other than Dr. Utpal Dholakia, the George R. Brown Professor of Marketing, Rice University, USA. Dr. Dholakia is a researcher of great repute, a globally experienced and acknowledged professor, and more importantly, Dr. Dholakia is an expert in the area of customer experience and consumer welfare. We certainly could not have found a better specialist and a better fit to deliver the keynote address than Dr. Utpal Dholakia on conscious consumerism and marketing as such. Now, without any further ado, let me not come in between Dr. Dholakia's keynote address and you people who are attending this particular conference. So thank you very much. And I'm going to, pass it on to Sakshi, please, or compare. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for addressing the audience and taking us through the journey of SGMC. So as Dr. Dholakia has joined us, we would like to warmly welcome sir to today's conference. I would now like to call upon Dr. Dimple Kaul, the chairperson of the conference, to open the conference. Dimple ma'am, I request you to kindly announce the opening of the conference.
Thank you, Shikha. Thank you very much. I thank our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Rajshekharan Pillai, our Director, Dr. Monica Khanna, our Area Chairperson for Marketing and International Business, Professor Isaac Jacob, and our esteemed guest, Dr. Utpal Dholakia. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to open the conference. I hereby open the 16th SIMSR Global Marketing Conference, and I wish all participants and authors all the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We now have amidst us our distinguished keynote speaker for the 16th SIMSR Global Marketing Conference, Dr. Utpal Dholakia. We welcome you, sir. Dr. Dholakia is currently the George R. Brown Professor of Marketing at Rice University. Dr. Dholakia worked as William S. McRae Jr. and Simon's Distinguished Associate Professor of Management, Rice University from 2008 to 2011. Dr. Dholakia has also worked as a visiting faculty marketing at London Business School, Korea University Business School, University of Zurich, to name a few. Dr. Dholakia has an MS degree in psychology and a PhD in marketing from University of Michigan, an MS degree in operations research from the Ohio State University, and a BE degree in industrial engineering from VJTI, University of Mumbai. Dr. Dholakia has conducted studies on consumer behavior, customer community participation, consumption trends, financial decision-making by consumers and investors, pricing and marketing strategy for startups, small and mid-sized enterprises, and digital marketing issues. Dr. Dholakia has published research in many top marketing and management journals, including the Harvard Business Review, Journal of Marketing Research, the Journal of Consumer Research, Journal of Marketing, Journal of Consumer Psychology, and Organizational Science. His recent projects in progress related to ecologically sustainable consumer behavior and lifestyle orientation theory. Dr. Dholakia has extensive consulting, executive training, and expert witness experience in financial services, technology, healthcare, and energy industries, and much more. Dr. Dholakia has also consulted widely on design and evaluation of pricing strategies, consumer experience strategies, quantitative analysis for obtaining and maintaining customer information, and developing positive ROI marketing campaigns, CRM adoption, and branding issues. He writes very frequently for Harvard Business Review, and his blog on psychology today is called The Science Behind Behaviour. Dr. Dholakia shall be delivering the keynote address on the topic, Some Thoughts on Consuming Wisely. We welcome you, sir, to our conference, and we humbly request Dr. Dholakia to take it further from here. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, thank you, Shikha. Thank you very much. So before I begin, I have two questions for you. The first question is, can you hear me properly? Is my voice clear? Yes or no? Yes? Okay, I see some thumbs up. That's good. So, and the second thing is, I want to apologize because I had some technical difficulties in joining promptly, and I still am not able to get my camera to work. So unfortunately, you are not going to be able to see my my face and my appearance. You will have to kind of rely on the photographs that you can see in Zoom. And so the slide deck that I want to show you is I have shared it. Can you all see the slide deck? Yes. Is the slide deck visible, Shikha?
No, sir. So we are not able to see the slide deck.
Okay, so I've shared it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now we are able to see it.
You're able to see it now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, good. All right, perfect. So let me begin. Okay, so since this is the beginning of the conference, and please, if my voice drops off, please let me know, because the only way I can know that something is problematic is if you tell me. Okay.
Yes, sir, sure.
All right. So, since this is the beginning of the conference, I think it is quite appropriate to begin with this really wonderful Sanskrit saying, which is, we are in an academic community here, and most of us do academic research. So it is very important to say Vidya Dadati Vinayam, which is let us all be humble. It's okay to talk about billionaires, and it is okay to talk about how amazing marketing is and how many billions of dollars are being earned and spent and all these types of things. But at the heart, let us all be humble and respectful of what it is we are trying to do. Okay, so with this in mind, let me jump into my comments about some thoughts on consuming wisely. I'm going to first begin with a disclaimer, which is everything I'm going to say here is based on my opinions and my interpretation of other people's and my research. Nothing that I say in this talk should be construed as psychological or financial advice, because after all, when we are talking about consuming wisely, we are talking about kind of being prescriptive and kind of thinking about how to do things well. So in such situations, typically the individual unique circumstances matter a lot. And while it's okay to have research findings which give us some indication, I don't think any of the findings apply to every person in the same way. So what makes sense for one consumer can often be disastrous for another consumer. So let us also keep that in mind. So let me talk a little bit about the driving force behind this work. I've been in this profession for now more than 20 years. I've done a lot of studies. Shikha was kind enough to describe all the accomplishments and so on. But one thing which kind of like always comes in my mind is after researching all these consumer behaviors, are we actually using some of these findings in our own lives? And are we good consumers ourselves? Are we wise consumers? Can all the people listening here, can they sort of stand up and say, yes, I have some wisdom. I'm consuming in a way which I feel is wise. And I'll obviously talk about what I mean by wise, but can you say that? So I've been thinking about this for many years now, and I've tried to kind of like reflect and apply some of the thinking to my own life. And so that is what I want to share with you about. It's something quite personal, and which comes from the work. So the findings from my own research into applying to my own life. And again, I'm going to kind of like link, since you're going to see a lot of research discussions over the next couple of days, I think it is very important to point out that having a lot of data and a lot of information and a lot of studies is not enough. We are drowning in information, but we are starving for wisdom. This is a wonderful quote by the biologist E.O. Wilson. And I think this applies to our field, whether we think of our field as consumer behavior or we think of our field as marketing. I think it applies very much to us. We are looking for too much data and too much information, but we have kind of lost. And when I say we, I mean in a collective sense, we have lost our way a little bit in terms of what does it all mean, looking at the big picture. And so this is the fundamental question behind my talk today, which is what can we learn and apply from our own research and from other useful sources, going further beyond our research also to consume wisely. Okay, and I'm going to hold up the questions for maybe the end. I have about 45 minutes to 50 minutes worth of conversation, and then we can have some discussion and questions if it's appropriate. Okay, so I'll use the word wise in this. Going back, I said the consume wisely, and I think both the words there are very important. I use the word wise in the phrase consuming wisely deliberately. So I thought about this quite a bit. Not consuming consciously, not consuming ethically, not consuming mindfully, not sustainably. And I know this conference is called, it has the word conscious in the title, but I'm choosing deliberately not to use that word or any of the kind of related words. This is for two important reasons. The word wise, I think, is very important. The first thing is there's a huge dose of common sense in what I have to say. Okay, so the common sense in an uncommon degree is what the world calls wisdom. And again, when we are looking at all these research findings, we tend to kind of like look for novelty and something amazing and something surprising. But the reality is often the least surprising and the most obvious things are also the most important ones. And it is important not to lose sight of that fact. And the second thing, now this is a busy slide, but let me talk a little bit about this. Okay, this is my opinion. So I feel that all the concepts like conscious, ethical, mindful, sustainable, they're all relatively specific and other focused terms, especially as they are used in our academic marketing and consumer behavior literature. So for example, if you look at this article by Shet, Setya, and Srinivas, they talk about mindful consumption. And very quickly, they kind of like go into the second sentence there, sense of caring for the self, for community, and for nature. And so they're talking about behaving in a way which is meaningful not just to the person, but to everyone else. Now, I feel that when you think in these broad, kind of like other-focused ways, you tend to worry about the sustainability. So to me, it is not clear that these consumption modes are sustainable for individual consumers, or even that they are aligned with the individual's values. Just because someone tells you that it is important to be a conscious consumer or a mindful consumer doesn't mean that it is something that you really believe in or you want to do. Whereas wisdom, I think, is a much more kind of common theme. So these other consumption modes, to my opinion, tend to be aspirational, not prescriptive. They are more a way for managers and for academic researchers to feel good about themselves, rather than to actually practice. It's kind of like the idea there. Okay, so now let me kind of like dig into what I mean exactly in a little bit more detail. So let's describe the markers of consuming wisely. So how will you know that you are consuming wisely? How can I know that I'm a wise consumer? Okay, and so I have like listed about 6 different things there, and let's go step by step through them. Okay, so and again, what I want you to do is I want you to think about whether this applies to you, whether it is a meaningful goal for you to have, and so on. Okay, so the first one is they derive sustained and balanced sensuous pleasure from their consumption activities. The second one is the consumption activities contribute to their and close others' happiness. Their consumption activities are consistently consistent with their values. I'll talk about all of these in a little bit more detail. They have quelled the urge to brag about or display their possessions or consumption activities, and rarely or never do so. No bragging. So one of my biggest rules is no bragging allowed. I mean, this is a rule I've come to kind of really embrace, especially in today's social media world, where you go on LinkedIn, you're going to like brag about how many citations you have. I'll talk about this in a second. How many citations you have, or how much, what you purchased or what you bought. I mean, on Facebook. And this is the antithesis of wise consumption. So number 5, they do not experience jealousy from others' consumption activities. And then the number 6 is they consistently experience financial peace. So these are what I call the markers of wise consumption. And you can see all of them really center on the self, because I firmly believe that to behave wisely, you have to start with yourself rather than worrying about others. Okay, moving on. So as a sidebar, I also want to define consumption activities in a little bit more specific way. What I mean by consumption activities is all the processes of cognition, emotion, and behavior that a person engages and experiences during consumption. Not just activities preceding purchase, where most of the research, so for example, I can bet, I haven't looked at the program of the conference, but I can bet that most of the papers are going to involve purchase as kind of like the focus in some shape or form. But when you go into the wisdom of consumption, it's really the after purchase, which is the use, reuse, the connection with the product. All of those things are much more meaningful. And so again, let's start with the list and go through a list in a little bit more detail. I started with pleasure was number 1, and then happiness was number 2. So I want to explain that a little bit more detail. And this is a wonderful quote from Samuel Butler. All animals except man know that the principal business of life is to enjoy it. Let me ask this rhetorical question. I don't want an answer from you, but how many of you are really enjoying your life? And despite, I mean, I know all the problems that are going on at the moment, especially with COVID and so on, but how many of you are really able to stand up and say, I'm really enjoying my life? And not too many people, not just in this group, but by and large, it's a really high barrier to reach. And so this is the idea here, which is all animals and wise consumers know that the principal business of life is to enjoy it. And for me, when I think of consumption, we tend to think of it in a very heavy-handed way of like all these really serious things. But the bottom line is consumption is about enjoyment, about pleasure, about positive emotional responses. So let's begin with pleasure. What we mean in the context of wise consumption, pleasure has a sustained aspect and a balanced aspect. And the sensuous refers to the fact that it's the senses that are being sort of engaged in the act of consumption. And again, I mean, this is a whole philosophical discussion you can have, but of all the activities that we can do in our lives, consumption activities are perhaps one of the most powerful conduits of pleasure in a day-to-day kind of like living sense. And pleasure that is recognized and experienced fully in the moment and remembered and savored afterwards. So this is kind of like, in my opinion, one of the biggest missed opportunities for us as consumers is we have all these wonderful, from moment to moment, we have these opportunities to experience pleasure from our consumption, and we lose them. We lose many of these opportunities. And so really the idea of like experiencing pleasure attentively is very important. And so moving on a little bit, let me kind of also kind of bring in this discussion of Western-centric versus more Eastern, more relevant to India, which is all the research that we tend to see in our academic journals tends to be extremely Western-centric. And in my opinion, it distorts the reality in some sense. Okay, so let me explain this a little bit more. So if you look at the Western perspective on pleasure, you look at the literature and the types of articles which are written. Typically, they tend to be done by American and European researchers, which have their worldview. So this is the definition of hedonic consumption. Those are facets of consumer behavior that relate to multi-sensory, fantasy, and emotive aspects of one's experience with products. So the way they look at pleasure is things like rafting on the river or climbing an expedition to Everest. These are the things which are supposed to provide pleasure and enjoyment to the consumer. Surfing, clubbing and drug use, skydiving, okay? And if you really think about it, I mean, this is, to me, I mean, at least it's quite alien. So here's the Eastern perspective on pleasure. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh, a wonderful quote on drinking tea. It's a long quote, but let me read out some of the key parts here. Tea is an act complete in its simplicity. When I drink tea, there is only me and the tea, and the world dissolves. There are no worries about the future, no dwelling in the past. I drink the tea, the essence of the leaves becoming a part of me. I'm changed by the tea. I'm informed by the tea. There is only the tea and me, complete. And so this is the pleasure. This is a type of pleasure that I'm talking about that we are kind of not able to grasp and enjoy because we're not paying attention a lot of the time. And so wise consumption is being able to derive, like Thich Nhat Hanh is able to derive pleasure in the simple act of drinking tea every single day, is what we are trying to aim for, not going to the club and dancing and river rafting and taking drugs. So I'm kind of like, what I'm advocating for to everyone who's listening to this is that we need a much more Eastern, much more kind of perspective which makes sense to us as Indians, as Indian researchers, as Indian consumers, to think of this idea of pleasure. Okay, I'll move on to happiness now. So happiness, just like pleasure, very few other things can give you happiness as consumption can. Of course, relationships can, and professional success can, and financial wealth can to a certain extent. But I think consumption is a sustainable and concrete way to provide happiness, okay? And there are big differences. There's a whole literature on the differences between pleasure and happiness. But generally what we are talking about with happiness is much more longer term and broader kind of subjective well-being, a state of contentment, a state of well-being. And typically it's a little bit more complicated than pleasure as well, because we are talking not just about getting things, but also about things like concepts like restraint, sacrifice, and caring for and giving to others. So you have to again bring a much more kind of a nuanced perspective on how to consume. Moving on to the consistency with values, which I think is perhaps the most important of the six. And I'm sure you have all seen this quote before, but it is, when you really reflect on this Gandhi quote, which is happiness is what you think is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. Really, we all, I mean, I don't think anyone is going to disagree with his statement, but how many of us are actually practicing this statement in the reality, in truth, day after day? And so I'll just give you some examples of actually consumption which is not consistent with values. Okay, and again, you can think about like how many of these things apply to you. So in the context of environmental conservation, most of us will agree that using plastic bags is a terrible thing. Yet over the last year, since the pandemic hit, there's a huge increase in the use of single-use plastic bags among brands and shoppers who all profess to care about the environment. I don't know if you can think about your own behavior and see if this applies to you. Have you started using or used more plastic bags even though you believe in environmental conservation? Similarly, people who are kind of profess to be thrifty and to buy secondhand clothing and so on, buy a lot more of that clothing. There are studies which show that. If you go to honesty, the frequent incidence of blackmailing small businesses for free services, free merchandise, or they will give a negative review, things like that. So people profess to be honest, but they behave in very deceitful ways. Patience. People say they are patient, but they consume as if they are very, very impatient. And so the point I'm making is if you want to consume wisely, you need to consume and behave in ways which are consistent with the values you profess to have. And this is, I'm not sure this is really a researchable issue. This is a practice issue. This is an issue of actually practicing. Okay, no bragging rule. I don't have too much time given the limitations to go into this in detail, but I firmly believe that the Lao Tzu quote, accomplish but do not boast. Do not post on LinkedIn how many citations you have or how many people attended your conference or whatever, you know. Because I noticed, I mean, because this is one thing which is the biggest marker of unwise consumption, right? I mean, but let me go a little bit in detail in just 1 minute about this. What exactly do we mean by bragging? Is sharing news of positive events and achievements. Nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing to do from your life. So this is the bad part, which is with the explicit or implicit objectives of arousing jealousy in others or enhancing one's image in comparison to others. Okay. So providing positive information about yourself for informational reasons is fine, but that's not what people are doing these days. Okay. And it's highly dysfunctional. And bragging is growing to epidemic proportions. Bragging has numerous negative effects. So I can give a whole talk on the negative effects of bragging. But the point is that this is no bragging is kind of like the marker of consuming wisely. And again, I mean, you can reflect on your own behavior and the behavior of people you know and see to what extent you are, quote unquote, consuming wisely using this marker. Okay. And then the final one, I'm going to skip jealousy. I'm going to go to the final one here, which is financial peace. So these are statistics from the US from like the recent times. For about 3/4 of the people of Americans, personal finances is the #1 source of daily stress. More than half of them have less than $5,000 in savings, which is about a month's cushion. And then 40% don't have enough money to cover a $400 emergency expense. I don't know what the numbers are for India. And India, the situation is a little bit different, but given the kind of like the disparity in the different groups of Indian citizens and so on. But the point is, very, very few people have financial peace. And what I mean by financial peace is an outcome marked by an absence. So it's really lack of financial stress on a day-to-day basis that I'm talking about. And brought about by consumption activities. So making prudent buying decisions, prudent consumption activities, saving money consistently, accumulating minimal levels of debt, having good money management habits, all of these. So consumption relates very much to financial decision making and outcomes, and we need to make that connection even stronger. So yeah, so now this is where we have to really think, because I think if we go through this list, most of us, or even I might even go so far as to say, all of us are not really consuming wisely. And so what we need is some kind of like a set of prescriptive rules to help us get to these outcomes. We want to experience pleasure, happiness, financial peace. We want to stop bragging. We want to stop being jealous. We want to consume consistently with our authentic values, whatever they might be, whatever you actually have. I mean, values are also intensely personal kind of possessions. So you want to consume in a way which matches what you really believe in some sense. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you get to a place where you can actually experience these outcomes? So I have 7 rules, and I'm going to share 2 of them with you, not 7. 7 is too much to share now, but I'm going to share 2 with you in a little bit detail. 1 in a lot of detail, 1 in a small amount of detail. Okay, in the next 20 minutes or so. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the consuming wisely rules. Okay, so let's start with the first rule. And now I'm going to step back. So I'm not going to tell you the rule first. I'm going to set it up, and you can tell me what the rule is based on what I tell you first. Okay, so this is the problem. Okay, so the problem is this. If you look at today's marketing paradigms, all the research that many of the esteemed scholars in our field have done, and which has influenced marketing practice, this is what has happened. All the marketing paradigms invariably put the customer on a pedestal. Okay, and these are just some examples. I'm not even going to read this in a lot of detail, but if you look at the commitment trust theory of relationship marketing, service profit chain, customer lifetime value, customer experience design. I mean, there are like hundreds of papers on each of these theories and paradigms. They all say pretty much the same basic fundamental thing, which is sacrifice short-term transactional gain, and your goal should be long-term relational value with the customer. So don't focus on a single profit from a single sale, but focus on the lifetime value and meet and exceed customer expectations. And now in the customer experience, which has become very popular in recent years, the focus is on providing peaks of experience, so of elevating the positives and eliminating the negatives. Okay, so all of this is to say that, and these are some quotes. So this is Sam Walton, founder of Walmart. Exceed your customer expectations. If you do, they will come back over and over again. Give them what they want and a bit more. The customer is always right. This is a Jeff Bezos quote. Last sentence is the most important. Focus obsessively on the customer. Put the customer first. So everyone, and it's very hard to find someone who doesn't say this or who says the opposite, actually. Don't put the customer first. I mean, no one is going to tell you that. And if you look at some of the theories and frameworks we use, I mean, this is the brand relationship hierarchy, is you are moving the customer up the pyramid, and your goal is to make everyone into a brand advocate or a brand evangelist. Right? I mean, I think this comes from the brand management world. And if you look at like different, so these are all American companies. This is a company called Target. Expect more, pay less. This is L'Oreal. Because you are worth it. The best or nothing, Mercedes-Benz. Open happiness. So they set the bar, so I open a can of soft drink, you're going to open happiness. The best a man can get. Think big. This is IMAX. Buy less, demand more. Right? So the customer is constantly told, all these are brand promises. Expect more. Think big. Demand more. The best for you. Right? Basically, they're raising when I say your, I mean the consumer's expectations. And raise your expectations. We will meet and exceed them as the generic brand promise made by many, many brands. And I'm sure in India, you just have to go and look at all the Indian brands and the taglines that they're using. You're going to see it's going to be something very, very similar. Okay, so and also now moving on to the core principle of customer experience design. make every customer experience memorable. This is what I teach. I teach a course on customer experience management to my students. And as a manager, this is what you want to do. You want to really make the customer not just happy, delight them, right, in some sense. And the science behind it is quite convincing. So the science is rigorous. And so the whole idea is that if you provide an experience to the customer, which is kind of like the humdrum experience, they're not going to remember it very much. But if you give them a peak, they're going to remember it much more. And if you give them a peak and you give them a positive ending, the ending was also on a high note of the experience, they're going to remember it even more. And what that means is, this is from the Heath and Heath book called The Power of Moments. To create fans, you need the remarkable, and that requires peaks. Peaks don't emerge naturally, they must be built. So this is the advice that all the marketers and the service designers are getting, right? And then if you look into design thinking, most of the thinking and most of the design thinking, at least as it applies to marketing and service design, tends to focus on how to improve customer experiences. So, we have like projects and cases where we focus on improvement, on service improvement, essentially. So every brand is trying to turn the customer into a brand evangelist, okay? And I'm sure you're not going to disagree with any of this. This is what we teach our students. This is what we teach the managers that when we consult for them and so on. Every marketer is constantly adding new peaks and raising old peaks of the customer experience to give memorable peak experiences. So the question is, isn't it great? If you're a customer, if you're a consumer, everyone is pandering to you and everyone is giving you these amazing things. And it's great to be a customer in a customer-centric world, right? No, it is actually exhausting to be a customer. It's terrible. This is really, really bad. And this is something that we really need to think a little bit about. Now, from the manager's side, everything I told you so far for this rule is thinking like a manager. How should a manager behave with a customer? Now, look at this from the customer's perspective. Okay, there's two serious problems for the customer with the raise customer expectations and exceed the mindset that marketers are adopting. One is adaptation, and then the second is severe dissatisfaction. Okay, so let's go to adaptation first. The idea behind adaptation theory, and this is an old theory, this has been around since the 60s, Helson's theory, adaptation level theory. So the idea here is that the exposure to a stimulus serves as the frame of reference to judge a subsequent stimulus. And any stimulus which is encountered later, if it has to make an impression, it has to be quite different from the stimuli which have been encountered before. And even then, even when it is seen as different, that effect is going to be temporary. Okay, so that's because people adapt to the new stimulus quickly, making it the frame of reference. What that means, and this is a wonderful quote from Thomas Gilowitz, the psychologist. One of the enemies of happiness is adaptation. We buy things to make us happy and we succeed, but only for a while. New things are exciting to us at first, but then we adapt to them. And this is true pretty much of any item you can think of the most ultra luxury item, sort of a mansion by the sea, whatever you want to think of. Even if you have a mansion by the sea, you're going to get used to that view of the sea in a few days. And that's what he's talking about. It's because we adapt to them. And so this is what I call the slippery summit of adaptation. The customer's expectations have some starting point. The marketer exceeds them, and then the customer revises the expectations. The marketer exceeds them. The customer revises the expectations. Again, it goes on, and the customer's expectations keep increasing and increasing. And that's essentially what you find. This is from the Fornell et al. Book, where they essentially show that our expectations as consumers, and this is across a lot of different industries, but for service industries, this is particularly problematic. It's people's expectations, customers' expectations have increased quite a bit. And we all know, as marketing experts, we all know what happens when expectations are high. You essentially find that for the same level of perceived performance of a product or a service, when the customer's expectations are low, they're going to have a pleasure or a sense of accomplishment that they're going to actually derive many of the positive outcomes I talked about earlier, pleasure, happiness, a sense of well-being, whatever you want to call it. But if your expectations are too high, you're going to end up with anger, disgust, frustration, disappointment, vengefulness, all these terrible things. And so, again, I mean, this is old stuff. This is from Anderson's, Professor Rolf Anderson's 1973 article. Okay, so this is like almost 50 years old. Assuming that customer dissatisfaction is a function of the disparity between expectations and perceived product performance, unrealistic expectations generated by promotion. He's talking about promotional exaggeration in 1973. But now replace promotional exaggeration with all kinds of social media discussions, customer reviews on Yelp or some other site, all kinds of things that can result in customer dissatisfaction. Or all the pandering essentially that marketers are doing to customers. They're essentially setting up the customer to be unhappy. Okay, so case in point, many of you might know this, but many service providers are shifting their focus from fixing failures to fixing micro failures. Now they don't have too many failures to fix in many cases. They're doing quite well. They already doing a very good job. So customers are getting even more picky. So instances of, so what is a service micro failure? An instance of a service delivery where the customer expectations go unmet in some really small way. So the waitress did not refill the glass for 5 minutes. That's when the customer is angry. Or on Amazon Prime, instead of delivering in free shipping in 2 days, they delivered on the 3rd day. So that makes them angry. So the tolerance levels have gone down completely. And because when I say I mean it as consumers, because our expectations are high and are constantly increasing, we are routinely left dissatisfied after buying products and services. So here are some examples. This is a Yelp review of a really good restaurant in Houston. And this guy is saying, okay, a group of us have been talking about going to this restaurant for 2 years. We finally made it, but I don't think we'll be back. It was just okay. Service was okay, food was okay, ambiance was okay. With the prices charged, we expected more than okay, under-delivered. And if you go on the different subreddits where employees talk about this, about how entitled and unrealistic customers are. Here's an example. So this is an employee in a restaurant talking about, he also stated how the hostess wouldn't have a member sat him to the table and went back to work. I didn't know we were required to sit down and talk to you. So now customers expect that the hostess will not only take you to the table, but they'll actually have a conversation with you. So again, high expectations. I work customer service, and lately it has been more and more people complaining and getting perceived they are made to wait at all. So zero tolerance for waiting. This is a cashier at Walmart. It's been a nightmare. The first 3 months, and they're talking about the situation during the pandemic. So during the first 3 months, there were item limits. Everyone was angry and combative. Now it's the masks. So this is a COVID-19 surcharge. Many restaurants to kind of like cover their additional costs because of like masks and things like that. They added a surcharge of $2. And this customer was so angry, and they tweeted and they threatened this restaurant, that threatened the owner of this restaurant that they're going to come and beat them up and so on. So for a $2 surcharge. And so anybody whose work requires them to transact with the general public knows that the customer is frequently wrong, sometimes rude, and a few are occasionally vengeful or spiteful. Now, our marketing theories are very, very inflexible. They just do not allow the possibility of this situation, or they kind of tend to sweep it under the rug. We have this mentality that the customer is always right, and let's try to give the customer everything that they ask for. Okay, so this is where the conflict lies. And so this is my point now. Okay, so given this whole argument I have built, this is the point I want to make. It's because of our unreasonably high expectations as consumers, we are missing out on experiencing joy and happiness from consuming activities. And yeah, so this is a quote from Barry Schwartz. He's talking about the past versus now. Okay, the reason that everything was better back when everything was worse is that everything was worse. It was actually possible for people to have experiences that were a pleasant surprise. In the world we live in, the affluent industrialized citizens, perfection is the expectation. The best you can ever hope for is that the stuff is as good as you expect it to be. You will never be pleasantly surprised because your expectations, my expectations, have gone through the roof. And so I can, again, I'm just going to quickly talk about this. I mean, this is an important issue. Is what do I mean by high expectations? It's things like this. It's having an expectation that my entire customer experience will be flawless from start to finish, whether it's like a restaurant meal or a hotel stay or whatever. Or I'll be delighted and amazed by the customer experience. Whatever the service provider will provide. These are the types of expectations which I consider to be unreasonably high. And the point is that there are many adverse effects. So unreasonably high expectations have adverse effects. And these are just some of them. Many customers are satisfied and they experience anger, frustration, disappointment, regret, distress, upset, even stress. Customers are unforgiving. So I'm not even talking about forgiveness today at all, because forgiveness is a big part of this discussion of consuming wisely. But we'll just focus on unforgiving text, which is they're unlikely to give the benefit of the doubt to anyone. To service providers, they're going to get abusive very, very quickly, angry and kind of stressed out. They're intolerant. So many customers are intolerant even of small problems. They're vindictive. They're even abusive during service encounters, and behave in ways that conflict with their professed values. And most importantly, they're active. I mean, these are terrible things to do. All the things listed, the first four, they're bad things to do for where the service provider is concerned. But for themselves, I mean, they're missing out on the pleasure and joy of engaging in consumption activities. They're missing out is the main point. And so the secret to happiness is low expectations. And so this, I'll end this rule with this quote from Stephen Hawking. We all know who Stephen Hawking was. My expectations were reduced to zero when I was 21. When he got his condition. Everything since then has been a bonus. And so that is a very good mentality to have in life, is to reduce, maybe not to zero, but to lower the expectation. So my consuming wisely rule number 1 of 7 is this one. Lower your expectations for consumption activities to reasonable levels. Okay, so where the marketer is telling you to exceed the expectations, as a consumer, you want to lower the expectations, not increase them or not exceed them or not raise them. Okay. Okay. So, how much time do I have, Shikha?
You have 10 more minutes.
Okay.
You can
10
go
minutes.
ahead.
Okay. So I think I have enough. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Dimple. So let me go to consuming wisely rule number 4. And so I want to bring in, because this is one of the areas I do some research in as well. So this is an interesting area. I like this a lot. Rule number 4 is about managing money and consumers' financial vulnerability. Okay, so I feel personally that spending and saving money are two sides of the same coin. And consumption activities typically involve decisions about spending, but decisions about saving, investing, and donating go together. So we have to kind of like look at all these decisions in one consolidated way. So now I'm going to, before I tell you what the rule is, let me kind of set it up a little bit. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. And I think because I have like a lot of exposure to Indian people, most of my family lives in India. I've noticed that very few Indian people actually follow this rule. The level of materialism in India is, at least in my observation and experience, has gone higher and higher over the years. And so it is worth pointing this out. Is fewer wants, and some of the older Indian values are quite important. And so the point here is consumption activities contribute to financial stress and vulnerability, and in both positive and negative ways. So things like frugality, restrained purchasing, using a budget, and there are studies on each of this. Okay, so I can pretty much cite multiple studies which kind of show this. It's fairly obvious. So I mean, common sense is enough to kind of indicate that. But these are established ideas here. Okay, shopping the closet, minimizing and eliminating consumer. Those are all good things. They reduce stress. They make you less financially vulnerable. Retail therapy, shopping impulsively, spending beyond one's means, imitating others, comparative consumption, addictions, impulsive buying, compulsive buying. I mean, all these things are bad. And the philosophy behind this rule is the excellent quote by Morgan Housel. He just had a book out last year called The Psychology of Money, which is excellent, which is really worth reading. But this is what he says. Doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. So it's not about, and that's why we often find that wealth doesn't correlate very well with income, nor does it correlate very well with the demographic factors like education and things like that you might think it does. Okay, I'm going to skip over some of this. But the point is, across the demographic spectrum, like those previous slides are showing about like different groups of Americans, most people are financially vulnerable. Again, I'm talking about American consumers here because that's what I have information and data on. But I think this is equally true for Indian consumers as well. And so I'm defining financial vulnerability like this. Okay, it's a slow changing psychological state indicating the degree of an individual's susceptibility to make bad financial decisions and experience negative financial outcomes. And again, we can go a lot into this. I can give a whole talk on just this topic of financial vulnerability. But let me go through this list in a little bit more detail. Most important, in my opinion, is the fact that they lack knowledge about personal finances and their own finances as well. And then they lack interest in managing personal finances, fail to set and pursue financial goals, lack control over spending. I already talked about this, prone to compulsive or impulsive shopping, fail to cultivate supporting financial habits, experience negative emotional responses to money, such as anxiety, frustration, fear, anger, and hopelessness, and they delegate financial decisions to others or they postpone making them altogether. So these are kind of like the indicators of people who are financially vulnerable. And again, it doesn't have to do with what their situation, what their actual financial situation is. It is their actual psychological and behavioral response to actually managing and handling money and managing financial decisions. That's what we are talking about here. And the problem, of course, is all those levers. The list was essentially a set of levers. They impact financial vulnerability, and which in turn leads to bad financial decisions and affects financial well-being. I'm going to skip that. And a lot of the recent work that I'm doing is really looking at the different types of knowledge that people have about money. And this is where kind of like you have this very interesting finding, which is financial knowledge is of really different types. It's not just one thing. It is not just financial literacy, which people think means financial knowledge. So financial literacy is simply the procedural understanding about how personal finances work. But financial self-awareness, which is understanding your current financial state. What are your assets? Where are your financial assets? What are your liabilities? Where are the liabilities? How much money are you spending every month? What budget do you have? Those things are very important as well. So is financial risk preference, which is an objective understanding of your own risk preference as a consumer with respect to money and wealth. And then finally, an understanding of your habits and behavioral tendencies related to saving, investing, and spending, which is really what I'm talking about here is a very detailed self-introspection of like looking into yourself and really understanding your situation and your personality and your preferences about money. So really, from a consumer perspective, when we say save money, we do not mean spend less money, but not spend anything at all. And so this is my consuming wisely rule number 4. I kind of like rush through this, but let me kind of like talk about this. Act purposefully to become less financially vulnerable. And a lot of the actions you have to perform to do that is to involve consumption activities, which is why this is kind of like a consuming rule, not a financial rule. And so I'm coming to the end of my talk. So I talked about two of my rules. The other rules, we'll have to wait for another time to talk about them. But the whole idea here is, so I think this is my final thought here. As consumer researchers, as marketing experts, yes, you are certainly responsible for teaching marketing to students and managers, or consulting with companies and so on. But I think you also have an obligation to be a good consumer. And in my terminology, what I mean by a good consumer is a wise consumer. A consumer who actually derives some real positive outcomes from consumption. And that includes pleasure, happiness, and financial peace for both yourselves and for the people around you by consuming wisely. Okay, so what I would exhort everyone to do who's listening is to kind of think about how you can kind of do research which balances, or which kind of like bridges what we kind of like say, do, and think as marketers, and then also what we say, think, and do as consumers, and kind of like balances those two things, because often those things tend to be in conflict. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I don't know if you have any questions or discussion, but I think we will stop here with this talk.
Thank you so much, sir, for your informative, immersive, and impactful addresses. We are very happy to have you today.
Pleasure.
So we can ask questions, no?
Sure.
Yes, Dr. Dholakia, I really was very listening very intently to your presentation. I really thought there's a lot of cultural context in the whole thing, you know, because America is one society which has propagated materialism to the hilt. And today, you know, I mean, it's just, it's like some sort of a paradox. I mean, they don't have money, but they have guns. I mean, I think it's some sort of a paradox, you know. People, the US dream is people going there to make money and spending, and, you know, also it's a full materialistic culture. So I think the cultural context,
absolutely,
when you were talking about expectations and happiness, I think it's bordering on Buddhism and a lot of, you know, our Eastern philosophies and religion. That's what I felt. We're going back to
exactly. Yeah, so I was just going to say that I'll just interrupt you for a lot of this discussion necessarily involves kind of religious and spiritual and philosophical kind of thinking as well. You know, it's not, from my point of view, I don't think it is enough to just rely on psychology and on just statistics and things that you can measure to think about these issues, because they will give us a limited and a distorted picture, you know, of these really important issues. Sorry, Dr. Khanna, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you, so please go ahead.
You know, I thought it's something to do with childhood upbringing also. You know, the way you were brought up. What is it? What are the things that the family and, you know, the society that you are in? What are the things on which they give importance? You know, I think it's a lot to do with that. I mean, if you see societies like, I mean, what we have read, like in Japan and all, you know, from the beginning, the children are taught that, you know, you should, they are made to clean the school after the school bell rings. There's a lot of community service, there's, you know, service before self and things like that. But I think that's all to do with the childhood, you know, I mean, I've been to Japan and I realized it's the best country I've seen in the world so far. The best of East and the best of West. I think it can't be better than that.
That's true. That's true.
Something with childhood upbringing.
I would agree. I would say there is some socialization and upbringing certainly which plays a role in how people think about consumption. You know, so I will not disagree with that.
Yeah. But very thoughtful. Let me tell you, it's very thoughtful. I mean, I've been really thinking about what you were saying. You know. Professor Isaac
Thank
seems
you. I
to want to
appreciate
say
that.
something. You want to say something, Professor? I mean, I can see
No,
it from
no.
your face. Even though we are online, you want to say something.
Dr. Dholakia, wonderful, presentation on consuming wisely, and you really put the cart before the horse, or rather the earlier it was so, and now we know where the cart actually is to be placed, for instance. But I have a very strong thought, and this is, I think, which is based on the value systems that a particular community or a particular audience gets ingrained into as such. And I've seen that happening in, I'm a Christian, in the Christian religion. One of the things that keep people very strongly rooted to a particular thought, an idea, and a particular line of thinking is the religious anchoring that actually happens, for instance. The unfortunate thing is that the US, the anchoring happens on the value of, money, which is now taken as a religion.
Yeah.
You get my point? And therefore, of course, this is again the Eastern and the Middle Eastern, processes that gets ingrained into a child's psyche. It's not just the upper end, for instance. It almost gets into the subconscious, unconscious kind of reactions that people have got. So if you were to look at it from that perspective, it becomes very difficult to uproot those kind of values from a consumption perspective. And that's what I have seen. That is what I have seen. And I'm a deep-rooted Christian, and I'm not bringing religion into this entire thing, but that's what I feel, that the US, the religion is monetary gains, for instance. Various other communities, including various other sects, they are rooted in the happiness of being rooted in something which is beyond, for instance, this world. And that's what they're looking for. I mean, I think that is a big philosophical question that I'm asking, but I feel that is perhaps one of the biggest rooted, value. I'm not even talking about emotions, but I'm talking about values as such.
Even Professor Dholakia, like I've seen, when we go to the US and all, when you go to a restaurant and if you order a burger or a Coke, you get a giant size burger, you get a giant size Coke. I will just stare at it. My God, it's for 4 people. And then they'll eat a little bit and then they'll throw it, or, I understand it's put in a box and then they take it for the dog and all sorts of horrible stuff. I mean, I think there's something, I don't know. I mean, these things require very deep introspection. Or how are we behaving, How are we behaving as humans? What's our relationship with nature and each other? I mean, it's really something to be thought about,
Yes. So let me address this a little bit more. Yeah. So what Dr. Jacob said, and also what you are saying, Dr. Khanna, in a general sense, you are right, obviously, that religion does play a role, and there are some big differences between the US and between India and so on. But the truth of the matter is that I also know a lot of extremely materialistic people, Indian people, who are also of different Indian religions, like Hindus and Muslims and Christians. Of all of those, I can think of actually specific people who are highly materialistic Indians. And then I also know a lot of Americans who are not at all materialistic and who are not particularly religious either. So it is, as a generalization, what you say is true, but there are certain things that you can do even if you don't have an upbringing or if you don't have a religious orientation. There are still certain things you can do to consume wisely. Okay, and that is kind of like what we are really interested in as marketing researchers, as in consumer researchers. It's not very useful for us to kind of just study what is happening and try to explain it. I think it's much more important to actually effect change, to give advice to people, to give them some help in how to consume wisely, regardless of where they are and what the religious background is and what their upbringing is. What can we do to actually help people do some of these things? That is kind of like my mindset going into thinking about this issue.
I think it's a complete paradigm shift in thinking and behaving and all, And I think especially because of the COVID pandemic, I think a lot of things are just, they're staring at the face, and I think they're demanding attention. Our behavior, our relationships, all is, we have to think about these things.
Yes, I agree.
I think, Dr. Dholakia, I think we have to redefine the concept of happiness itself and pleasure. And that is, I think, what we need to bring to the other side of the table. You get the point. And this is more of philosophical, perhaps, small thought, of really redefining the construct of happiness. What is happiness for me would be very different for a happiness for someone else.
I think we have to ask others also to say something. I think we are on the topic.
Yep.
Sir, I am Dr. Abha. I have a question. So, sir, can I ask a question? May I?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
Sir, all these years of studying marketing and teaching marketing, it has been that, it has been observed that you have to create a need. If there's no need, you have to create a need. You have to create a need. And in creating need, in that process to find the gap, we have been observing that all the communication, marketing communication, or this has been to show people that there is something you are lacking, or there is something that you're not complete, and that's how the need is created. So this is totally this philosophy, or I can say that everybody is. Because of globalization and all that, development is the kind of a keyword for everybody, that and development is now associated with what's your materialistic standing or your status, and because of this, this is totally like anti-marketing, and in a sense, so how do we actually what is the path forward? Because when we have to create a demand and we have to market things, how exactly are we going to, what is the way forward? Because if you're talking about being satisfied and being having less expectation, then how are we going to really create a need, or how are we going to increase the economy? So that is the fundamental kind of
So Dr. Abha, so I think this is a very critical, very significant and important issue that you have brought up. Okay, so that's first of all. But here's the thing. So as I think the introduction was done before, I work with a lot of companies and I provide consulting services, and I give them advice, which is pretty much what you said about like how to create demand, or I do some work on pricing issues and so on. But I do not think that these two perspectives, one of the marketer and one of the consumer, are necessarily conflicting with each other. Okay, and so let me explain why. So if you really think about looking at all these issues from the marketer's perspective, right? So the marketer is always trying to do things in their self-interest, whatever is going to work for them. So create demand, or earn a higher profit margin, or get more customers, whatever the case might be. And the customer, on the other hand, is the consumer. As a consumer, we have our self-interest and the self-interest of the people who are close to us in mind. Okay, so when I talk to managers, I will give them advice which is appropriate for them as managers, which is going to help them do their job. When I talk to a consumer, or when I behave as a consumer, I give them advice and I tell them things which make sense for them as a consumer. So there is this battle going on. I mean, to those of us who are Hindus, we know the battle on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, right? I mean, so it is exactly the same battle going on between the marketer and the consumer, and we can be on both sides of the battle. So I don't think I necessarily need to take a position at least a moral position that one thing is wrong and the other thing is right. But we can decide for ourselves. I mean, we can give the tools to the marketer and we can give tools to the consumer and let them fight it out, so to speak. So that's how I feel about this.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I think also, I think there's a lot of confusion amongst consumers today. Like if I take a product like a salt or a rice, I mean, you go to the market, they're giving you brown rice, red rice, this rice, that rice. I mean, somebody says something, somebody says something. I mean, I feel that when I was young and there was not much rice variety, I was happier. Today we seem more confused and more unhappy with the more variety that we have. And then they're talking about gluten-free and I don't know, all sorts of things. I've never heard of it in my childhood.
Exactly, yeah. That's
really
right. That's exactly right.
Even namak lene ko jayega, cooking oil lene ko jayega, so it's like really it's like, one big decision for everything today. I think it's really...
That's exactly true, yeah. You're exactly right.
I think at the end of the day, if you just take care of your lifestyle, I think makes a difference.
You have to behave in a smart, you have to behave, as we say, behave wisely. You have to consume wisely, Then any marketer activities are going to be neutralized in some sense.
Correct. Okay, it's quite interesting. I must say it's interesting. And of course, there's so much to debate and ponder over. I think it can go on and on.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So I think we have a question from Mr. Satyendra Kumar. He's raised his hand.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Dholakia, for very insightful aspect of the consumerism, actually. This give me a thoughts of that, like, can we say, like spirituality in the consumerism, because spirituality is the path where the people, they reach to the somewhere lower the expectation or wiseful use of the resources. So that's one aspect. And second question, what I would like to ask, how do you reach to the threshold of this wise consumption? Because this threshold varies people to people and the environment we are exposed to. Because if we want to go for the sustainable use of wise consumption, then we have to look into the threshold also, up to what limit. So what measure you would advise to reach out to this index? Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So can you say your first question again? I forgot. I didn't.
The spirituality in the consumerism.
Yeah, spiritual. Right. Got it. Yeah. So where spirituality is concerned, so this is what I think. So spirituality is, I think, certainly useful. It helps if you are spiritual. It helps you to consume wisely and to make to do all these things that I've been talking about. But I don't think spirituality or being spiritual is necessarily a precondition to consume wisely. So even if you are not spiritual, I think you can still do many of the things that we are talking about. But because what it really boils down to is really identifying the core values and kind of really explicitly kind of laying out how those values are going to be impacted by your consumption activities. So that is an important thing. Now, going to your question about the threshold, at least in my experience, I mean, no matter what measure you look at, most people, most consumers are really not doing the things we are talking about. I mean, they're far, far away from consuming wisely. So if you want to move the needle, it seems to me that it makes more sense to kind of like get people to at least do some of these things. I mean, what we are talking is kind of like the extreme side of behaving wisely, consuming wisely. But people are so far away that even if you get some people to do something better for them, that is going to make a difference. So I don't necessarily think we have to worry about everyone is going to start doing these things and marketers are going to be in a shock and there's going to be a recession. I mean, I don't think we need to really worry about this. I'll give you one analogy of this. So I do research on saving money, and one of the things we try to do is we try to find ways to get people to save more money, okay, which is a big deal in the US, is to increase the savings rate. And then an economist will typically in the audience will ask, what if people start saving too much? Isn't that going to hurt the economy? And the answer is, I think it's the same answer for this discussion we are having here, is most people are saving so little money that is not even an issue. People would have to save a lot more than they're doing right now for that to become an issue. And I don't think any of our research methodologies or our advice is going to get people to save that much money. So we are far away from that threshold, in other words, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we should have a balanced approach. Even spirituality and religiosity, there should be a balance in life. I think we are seeing the outcome of what is happening. Too much of, all this Kumbh Mela and all, everything has backfired.
That is true. But see, here's the thing. Again, I'm looking at this from an American perspective. Maybe the Indian perspective is different. Is religiosity and spiritual sort of affinity for spiritual kind of like thinking, these are traits, these are personality characteristics of people. Okay, you can't make someone religious, or you can't make someone spiritual if they are not. So you can only work with what they are, right? And you cannot change them in that sense. And that's where the issue is, right? We need methods as researchers and as kind of academics. I think we need methods to change people's behavior, change their thinking, right? That's what we want to do. I don't think we can change people's spiritual affinity or change their religious, how religious they are. I don't think we can do that.
I think there are many facets and very subtopics and themes. Ultimately, I think each one of us has to find our own happiness balancing point. Where do I find happiness? We all have to find it for ourselves and be happy within our zone, within our little zone of influence. You be happy. It's not necessary to compete. All the time you're looking outward. I think the Indian Eastern philosophy is to look inward and be happy.
That is true. We all need to practice what you just said.
It's very difficult to look inward. We are all the time looking outward. We have Professor Nelly. She's from Russia. I don't know what's her take on all this. Is she there? Nelly, are you there? I don't know. Okay, maybe she's not there.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, you're there.
I had some technical problems, but now I'm with you.
So what is your view on what is your society and what is your culture say about conscious consumerism?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Dholakia for the outstanding presentation and sharing some insights with us, very positive and very useful, I think, and I believe. So as for Russian society, I just want to share also a paradox that now exists in regard of mindful consumption. From one hand, lots of people suffer from lack of money, and they have to be mindful consumers. Not that it brings them from their minds, from their, desire, but they have to behave so because the lack of money. Lots of people lost their jobs, and that's easy. But from the other hand, there are plenty of people that suffered from these dramatic lockdowns, and now they are eager to enjoy life, to feel the zest of life, then to praise themselves for so many restrictions and limitations and so on. And they are willing to spend more. And to behave like, I don't know, the incentives, to make the incentives for them. And so they can't be like conscious consumers, but like, I don't know, a very mindless consumers in this case. So, dear Dr. Dholakia, what do you think? What are the trends of this post-pandemic consumer behavior? So, considering these two opposite trends of behavior. Thank you very much.
Sure. So, so again, all of this boils down to some basic theories, right? So, I don't think, in that sense, Russian consumers are that different from, let's say, another type of another kind of nationality or something like that. Okay, so because what you are talking about is someone who is deprived is suddenly now able to afford and wants to enjoy life. I mean, that's kind of like a natural phenomenon which has more to do with income and experience. I mean, we could replace the Russian nationality or the Russian experience with a lower income American consumer who suddenly has a good education and becomes a doctor and starts earning a high income. They're going to behave in a very similar way to that Russian consumer, you know. And so, and on the other hand, I mean, you mentioned the low-income consumers before. I mean, we have that category as well. So again, I don't think necessarily we need a theory which accounts for cultural differences, at least in this context. I think a theory which accounts for or uses rather simple variables like income and experience and education, things like that, is good enough to explain how these consumers will behave, you know, given their variables. I think, you know, but that is again not to say so. All the things that I talked about today, I think are broadly applicable. I mean, I think they apply just as well to a Russian consumer as they do to anyone else, you know. So I don't think if you go past the generalizations to the specifics of how each one of us is supposed to behave, you know, yes, it's true. I think someone mentioned before, upbringing matters. Kind of like the cultural, the religious stuff matters, the spirituality matters, but it's also the basic kind of humanness is the human qualities which kind of drive many of these wise consumption principles that I've been talking about. You know, so I've tried to make all this discussion broadly applicable to Indians, Americans, Russians, Japanese, and whoever. You know, I mean, I think that all of this applies to everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. I've lost my internet connection.
Okay. So if we do not have any more questions, maybe we can proceed ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's way past. I should mention this. It is way past my bedtime. You know. So yeah.
Okay, so we wouldn't take too much of your time. Thank you so much. It was actually a very interactive question and answer session. Too much to learn from all the people out here. Thank you.
Yes, it was wonderful. I really enjoyed the discussion afterwards. And thank you very much for this opportunity and for listening to me. And I wish you a very pleasant and a productive conference in the next 2 days. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. So I would just request you to wait for a couple of minutes just to join us to release the conference compendium. I now request our Vice Chancellor, Sir, Isaac, Sir, Monica Ma'am, and Dr. Dimple Ma'am to join us in releasing the conference compendium.
Oh,
Okay.
I think VC is not there. VC sir is not there. I think Professor Dholakia is also left now.
I think he's also left.
Internet
Okay.
disconnected.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I think it
So
must
we
be
can
1 o'clock in his home. 1
Yeah,
o'clock.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But past 1 o'clock. It'll be about it's 12:30 here. It's about 2 o'clock there. I think
Yeah,
close
yeah.
to that. Yeah.
Ma'am, with your permission and sir, your permission, can we now release the compendium?
Please go ahead. I think the conference organizers should release it.
Yes, we are just
going to clap.
releasing it.
We are going to clap.
Thank you, ma'am. Shikha, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've just informed. They're just setting it up.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah,
I think the
really
earth is looking
nice.
so leafy and nice.
Yes.
Very sweet.
Cheer up with reactions here on Zoom.
How many? 424 pages. ये कितने pages लग रहा है?
Yes, ma'am. More
Yes,
than
ma'am.
400 pages.
Oh, baap re. Too much.
Can we scroll to the next page also?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Just
Show
scroll
Aditi.
down. Yeah. Keep scrolling. Yeah. Keep scrolling. Yeah.
Hey, मेरा क्या नाम डाला है तुम लोग ने? I don't want it.
Ma'am, director's message. Dholakia sir is also there.
Yeah. Keep scrolling.
Wow. Nice pictures, Baba.
Ma'am, I've chosen this one of yours. More attractive.
This sari Hardeep had given me. Hardeep.
Wow.
He is
Yes, yes.
He's there. He's very much there.
He's looking very vibrant. Yes, he's always
Yes.
there. Yeah. Always there.
I have chosen this, ma'am. Among your two photographs, I chose this
Hardeep
photograph.
told me, after he got the sari, he told me, "आप पहन के आना, हम photographs लेंगे." I
So
said,
sweet.
"ठीक है, चल." And then we had a lot of photography, and also this turned out to be one of the best photos of mine.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yes, indeed,
Amazing.
indeed.
Yeah, amazing. Abha chose this.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, fine. चलो, बस हो गया.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Good, all the best. But 424 pages बहुत ज़्यादा है. तुम लोग का कितना बड़ा compendium.
पढ़ना पड़ेगा ना.
Yeah, 57 paper.
57 papers.
Extracted.
Research
Yeah,
papers.
extract.
Abstracts.
Yeah.
चलो, marketing rocks.
Hey.
Well done.
Well
Well
done.
done. SGMC team, phenomenal. Very good. Excellent. Excellent.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well
Shikha,
done.
please make the next
I
announcement.
think the theme is very relevant. It's become more relevant now because of the
Pandemic.
second phase of the corona.
In fact,
It's really
this-
becoming bad. Delhi is really bad.
This
Very bad.
team was discussed and finalized almost about a year back.
Year back, yeah.
Yeah, almost about a year back.
Okay.
Thank
So
you
now
so
what?
much for the
We have to
release.
meet at 12:45 for the papers.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I'll just make an
Before that-
announcement.
Before that, we have to release the next year's theme. Yeah. Better?
No, no,
Abhi,
that will
please
happen.
come tomorrow afternoon.
That's
evening.
tomorrow.
Okay.
Abha.
Okay.
So I'll just, thank you so much, all the dignitaries and all the distinguished guests and participants for attending the inauguration and the keynote addresses. We shall now break for lunch. I request everyone to be back by 1 p.m. We would be beginning by 1 p.m.
But there